All right. Good afternoon, or whatever time you're listening to this. My name's Daniel Cutright. Welcome to today's episode of Winning Mentality. Super excited to have our guest today, Coach, legendary coach, Mr. Winston Brown. Winston, how you doing?
Fantastic. Just got back from Virginia Beach. Feeling good.
Nice. Awesome.
Feeling
Refreshed. Get a little vacation in the pandemic.
And the pandemic has done a number on the beach experience. Yes. But still the beach. Still great. Still great.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah.
Good to hear. Good to hear, man. Well, Winston, you're over at Fork Union Military Academy. How long have you been coaching at Fork Union?
Well, this was the end of the 23rd year.
Okay.
So I'm going into 24. They're telling us that we will be back in early August. So yeah, I'll be starting the 24th year. I had coached for 7 years prior in the Portsmouth Public Schools, and a year at Western Branch, and a year at Christopher Newport. So I'm over the 30-year mark now in coaching. So.
That's awesome. And did you got a background running yourself as well? Is that correct?
I was a child of the 70s running boom, and probably did some things that they didn't even know at the time. It could be detrimental, or it could have a lasting impact. But yeah, I began running in 1973 and ran a marathon in 1975 at the age of 9. So
okay.
Yeah, that was a different time. Great time. A lot of energy. It was amazing how fast the running world took off. That was really, in the wake of Frank Shorter winning the Olympic gold in the marathon, the road racing craze took off. It was really the beginning of the fitness craze. And to be a part of that, to be at races where there would be 50, 60 people, and it was run out of the back of somebody's car. It was amazing. One of the funny things is, if you read these books about the early days of Nike selling out of cars, I remember people being at races that sold Nikes out of cars. So
wow,
that was a great start. Very interesting time. One of the things that really kind of kicked my love of the sport and passion was the Tuesday night summer track meets in Hampton Roads, which were in the 70s were cutting edge. It was amazing time. And that's where I got my start. I went to high school at Western Branch, and then went to Brevard College, and was fortunate enough to run for the legendary Norm Whittick. I was on his last 2 teams. He had a string of 4 straight national championships, and I was on the last 2 teams. And I count myself very, very lucky to have been a part of that great program. After Brevard, I went to Old Dominion to run there. It was an honor to run there on scholarship. Not long after we were done running, they ended the program, and so that hurt a little bit. But then I got into coaching. I coached a year under the Wade Williams, half a year, and learned a great deal from Wade. And then I spent 6-7 years with my father at Churchland High School, and that was a very, very rewarding. And then came to Fork Union. So.
Okay. What was your main event when you were racing?
I was a 5 and 10K runner in college, miler, 2-miler in high school. Really did much better in cross country, probably than I did in track. I guess my claim to fame in high school track would probably be getting 5th at the Dogwood Track Classic in 1984. Probably my big claim to fame. So
yeah, which is a huge meet.
Huge meet, and it was really big then, as it is now. It was huge then under the leadership of Dennis Craddock. Then it went away for a few years, and it made a comeback right at the turn of the century in 2000. And wow, the meet that it is now is very proud of what that meet became. So.
Yeah, that's that brings up fond memories too, and a lot of people probably don't know this, but you actually gave me one of my first track and field announcing jobs for the Gus Lacey Track Classic, and that opened a ton of doors for me to announce at other meets. One of which was the Dogwood Track Classic, which a lot of people will remember. That they might say the greatest high school 800-meter race of all time, when Alex Lomong, Drew Hunter, and the McGorty.
Brandon McGorty.
Brandon McGorty. I kept trying to call him his brother.
I was one of my most rewarding things was you getting into announcing. You do such a wonderful job at Gus Lacey. And I know that as a young man, I was always felt great because I could hear some familiar hooks in your announcing from your time being at events that I was an announcer at. So I always felt great about that. I used some hooks from the past from a guy by the name of Dennis Kozlowski at Bethel High School. He was a great announcer, great track coach, great football coach, but a very entertaining track announcer. But you took it to a tremendous level. And that day, that 800, your voice being on that and just everything that went down, it was just fantastic. It was one for the ages. You and your teammate Lawrence Minor have it's very good to see you guys involved. Lawrence is running finish lines and you're announcing, and it's that Louisa team is out there,
Oh, yeah.
That's a great thing.
Yeah, Lawrence is he's a guy I'm gonna have to get on here at some point too, because he's one of the best.
Yeah, I call him Lawrence Larry because he was Lawrence in high school, and now he's Larry. So
he's had many he's had many aliases in his day. So
yes, he has. Yeah,
yes, he has.
Great
but and it's super appreciative for the kind words, and like I said, the start into announcing, and you actually used to run, and we were talking about this a little bit beforehand too, but you used to run a radio show called Track Talk for several years, and it's kind of funny that I have you on here now. But tell us a little bit about that when you ran that show.
Well, Fork Union decided they were going to get into radio productions. They had a radio show. Really, Track Talk was the guinea pig. They put me on the radio covering track and field, and it was a great niche. But then they also had a show with Coach Fletcher Arrett for postgraduate basketball, and they had a show with John Schumann called Schumann Says, and he was the postgraduate football coach. And those were great shows and great energy. And I thoroughly enjoyed that. I think I had a couple of great interviews. Interviewing Mike Burns before he died, the creator of the Scholastic National Championship. That was a great interview. Interviewing Alan Webb, he did real well. So we were very fortunate we hooked some great guests over time. And I enjoyed the show. You go in every week and cover the results, talk about some of the highlights across the state. We were doing a show when Albemarle's 4x8 won the Penn Relays. And so to be able to spend a great deal of time talking about that, there was a lot of material, and this is a great area for running and particularly for high school track and cross country. The show really did meet a demand, and Fork Union made some cuts in their budget at the time, and the shows unfortunately went with that cut. But that show was on for several years. Dan Thompson produced it. He's their communications guy. It was on the ESPN radio, and I really, really did enjoy it. And I used to have people, I didn't think anybody was listening. I got to be honest. It would come on 6 o'clock in the morning. And I thought, man, what are there, like 5 guys probably driving somewhere and they hear this show, But people would come up to me and go, yeah, I heard you the other day on the radio. Really, you're one of 7 people. But, and they put them, they did put the shows on podcasts on the internet. So it was a good time.
That's awesome.
I love doing that show.
Yeah, and I'm sure you probably learned a lot from some of these guys too. I know when I'm doing these types of interviews, it's as much for selfish reason as anything, because I just feel like I learned so much from, hearing people share their stories and, just tips of wisdom. So
one of the great things about interviewing Alan Webb, he put in perspective. Not a lot of people don't know, but he's the course record holder at Woodbury Forest. He ran that course in 15:17.
I was at that race. I remember that race.
Right. That's a historic race. And he reflected that was the absolute hardest course he had ever run. And I tell people that's a tough course all the time. They don't believe me.
Yeah.
And to have him validate that and some of his insights, he was when I look at that, Daniel, I have to really say he was America's most complete distance runner ever. And still today, to this day, I would say maybe Lopez Lomong is approaching that now. When you look at his PRs, when you look at Alan Webb going from 143 all the way to about 27:25 for 10K, we've not had anybody of his like in a long time. So,
wow.
Yeah, phenomenal stuff. I think the media is very harsh on him because he didn't win an Olympic medal or a world championship medal. But there's a big chunk of the world walking around without those two accolades. So, but he had quite a career. He was 10 plus years at the top. So that's good stuff. So.
Absolutely. So going back to your coaching days at Fork Union from early on and even just kind of throughout your career, maybe what were some of your most memorable coaching experiences at Fork Union?
Oh, well, I tell you, that's right off the bat. That's a tough question because in my 23 years here now, I have relationships with so many people from the early days. And I tend to think of my coaching career here at Fork Union as having eras. There was the Mike Redden era.
Mm-hmm.
There was the Kippy Kano era. There was the Axel Mostrog era, and so forth. And then you got to the Lomong brothers. So we had a guy here named Brandon Caleb, who was wonderful. And then I reflect on some of the time here. I had some stories that wouldn't be, most people would not see as big stories. We had a young man here one year that started the year as the fourth best sprinter on our team, and he ended up being the double state champion, and that was a very special thing. And then we had a young man that was our battalion commander back in 2002, and he was tired all the time from being in charge of the whole cadet corps, and he came out for outdoor track. He'd been on the team for years, and we had to meet with Fluvanna High School, and he didn't score a single point. And then as that season went on, he didn't win a single race. And he lined up in his last race of his senior year in the intermediate hurdles, and he won. He was a state champion. And those are the kinds of things that stick with you. We've had All-Americans and national champions, and that's always a tremendous thrill. But then there are a lot of times there's those backstories, the things that make it a wonderful job. And all of it is a wonderful job, but then there are those things that go past rewarding. Those are just really, really special times.
Yeah. So. And when people think about coaching, or anyone that's ever been in coaching, you understand it's not a 9-to-5 job. It is, the hours are very long. The pay does not reflect the hours. And so the question is often warranted of why would you do something like this for 30 years? Why would you stay in coaching for so long? Is it those types of moments? Are there other things that really lend themselves to that?
It's a very addictive thing. We're very lucky in track and field to have numbers, real numbers in performances. And so coaching a young man when he's in ninth grade and he runs a 75-second 400, and his senior year he runs 49.2. There's no price tag on that. That's a very addictive thing. And it's, I don't want to call it a drug. It has a negative connotation. But that's something you can't get in most 9-to-5 jobs. You can't get it. You don't have very few professions do you have a chance to sit down at midnight on a Saturday night and reflect on all of the good and bad things that happened in a track meet that day, and to piece it together and to kind of evaluate. Those are the things that I enjoy, the process. I've really come to, that's probably been what I value the most.
Yeah. And you mentioned you still have relationships with a lot of these guys today, talk a little bit about that. Cause
I had a wonderful experience during this pandemic where we had one bill from this year's Gus Lacey track class that needed to be paid. Of course, we didn't bring in any entry money because the meet got canceled. And so all of the Gus Lacey honorees chipped in and paid for the medals that we had to purchase those months in advance, months before we even knew there was going to be, a COVID-19 pandemic. And so to be in touch with all of those men and to talk to them has been wonderful. One of the great things I have is that kids will come up to me 3, 4, 5 years after they've run for the Fork Union track team and say, "Coach, I missed the life." I said, "What do you mean you missed the life?" Getting up at 5 a.m. on Saturday, riding in a bus to a track meet, being in the track meet, and then riding home with all of my buddies and talking, doing what we do, running our mouths. So that's what I miss, and that means a lot to me because that is what I enjoy. Is that grind, that daily, that week after week grind is one of the things I enjoy.
Yeah, that's awesome. I remember, maybe shifting gears here a little bit, but I even remember early on, I was getting my master's degree in exercise physiology and thinking, hey, this is something I could really apply into coaching. And I remember a line that you told me has always stuck with me is you said, it's good to know exercise physiology, but don't become an exercise physiologist in the context of coaching. So maybe talk about that, or even talk about your coaching philosophy a little bit.
Well, I said that to you because you can go too far. You can err too far on the physiology side, I think. Sometimes there's a point where you have to put your foot down and go, okay, we have to do this. We have to change this. We have to do something a little different to get more out of you, the kid I'm talking to.
Yep.
You could say the same thing for psychology. It's great to know something about psychology as a coach, but not actually be a psychologist, because then you have to go too far onto that. So that's what I meant by that. You need to know a little bit about all of those things, but you also have to know when to piece that together. We had a situation a few years ago. We had a young man by the name of Julian Yeskis, who was a wonderful runner, a great competitor, and was not improving at the end of his senior year. We got to February, and you could see it hit the wall. And so we took his resting pulse, which was at the time, was about 56. And I said, okay, you're down to, we're cutting this off. I said, you get up every day, you come to practice, you run 25, 30 minutes, nice and easy, and that's it. The morning of the state outdoor track meet, his resting pulse was 43, and he won both races, the mile and the 2 mile. And so I think there's a time, you can have a set of workouts, and you can know that, okay, it's going to produce this physiological effect. It might for some people it might not. That might not be where they are.
Yeah.
And so it's as much an art as it is a science.
Love that. Yeah, that's great. And I think that separates a lot from what I've seen great coaches from good coaches is, you get a lot of times coaches think that it's a one size fits all. Here's the workout plan. This is what everybody's doing. But the ability to really know your athletes from a physiological standpoint, but then also from a psychological standpoint, knowing how to communicate with certain athletes. I know for me, when I was coaching boys and girls, that was it was two different approaches, and just learning how to balance psychology with the actual physiology and the workout side of things.
It is different, but I have noticed in the past 10 years, I have been amazed at the gains and the tremendous, I don't know what you call it, forward progress that the young ladies are making. It is
Absolutely.
When I first got into coaching, somebody could take up coaching girls track if they were organized and they had a little bit of culture to the team and they were just doing something. They were going to do well. They were going to win probably. Now the girls' end is so competitive, you can't make mistakes. You better get it right because everywhere else is getting it right. And it's great to see that. I've just been so impressed with some of the young ladies that I meet at their meets and so forth that compete, and just how far it's come. It's wonderful, I think.
Absolutely. No, I thoroughly enjoyed my experience coaching the girls when I was over at Monticello High School, and just a completely cohesive group with a work ethic, and to watch them excel was pretty awesome. We just had
they may be passing the boys up now. They seem to be more assertive now than a lot of young men I meet. So
I think so. I think so. There was just the lady out of Richmond, Kira. I'm blanking on her last name, but Diamato, I think is the. Did I say that right?
She was Kiara Karlstrom at Oakton High School. She was a great runner. Went to American. 1504 over at St. Chris last weekend.
Unreal.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah,
I would imagine that is a track record there.
I would imagine so as well.
I think it probably is. Yeah.
Seventh fastest in the world at 35 years or older, which is absolutely crazy.
Wow. Yeah, that's a wonderful thing. I was stunned. I looked twice. I saw that come across the phone. I said, "You gotta be kidding me!" 1504.
Yeah. What would you say was one of you just in your coaching experience, maybe one of your biggest learning moments?
That's easy. That is I'm going to tell you right now, it was the dumbest thing I ever did. But in 2006, we had a tremendous cross-country team. We had Axel Mostrog, Jeremy Haney, and Schumann Rolla. A guy by the name of David Johnson, who was very talented. We had Caleb Haney. We had another guy by the name of Jamie Reichland. We had a kid named Patrick Hayes. They were all fantastic. And this was before they had Nike regionals for teams. So you had to be voted in on this poll. So we won the William & Mary Invitational. And I was pretty certain, I said, after doing this, we're going to probably be in the top 2 in this poll. So we're all happy about winning the William & Mary Invitational. We're a week out from Maymont. I said, guys, we're going to eat some lunch, and then we're going to drive to Maymont Park, and we're going to jog the course. So we went to lunch. We got to Maymont. It must have been, 108 degrees. And that was not the nicest course in the world. Kind of tough to figure out where it went. Several just very, very difficult hills. And their guys went through the course and got on the bus, and they were like, man, that's terrible. That place sucks. And so they had this very negative vibe about this course. And we went out the next week and ran horrible. And I remember after that happened, I said, Brown, that was the dumbest thing that you have ever done. What we probably should have done is gotten something to eat and just gone straight back to school, and think about that on Monday instead of right there after winning a tough invitational, a William & Mary Invitational. And I think we probably had the plans too much in advance. So that was not a smart move.
So getting into the sometimes having athletes overthink things and trying to prevent that.
And the coach overthought that one. So it was my fault. I'll never forget, when it was over and with us getting like 6th or 7th place in that meet, I knew, I was like, well, we're not going to be back in that poll. We're not going to be anywhere close. We get in the bus, Jeremy Haney looks around and goes, man, I'm glad that Nike thing's over. That was a lot of stress. And the stress came from me. The stress, it was not from me. He was, to this day, Jeremy Haney is an Osprey pilot. He's under pressure all the time. He obviously can handle the pressure. The stress and the pressure came from the top of the team, and that was me, the coach. So, yeah, it was not a good move.
Well, and I think that's something a lot of people can learn from whatever industry they're in, or if they're in coaching too, is that sometimes, if you're leading an organization or if you're leading a team, you have these big goals and things that you want to accomplish, but how do you keep your team from receiving that stress, or how do you keep people calm? So how have you had to adjust?
Like I say, you may have this grand vision. It's important to make sure everyone else has that vision too. So, and in that case, maybe they didn't. So,
yeah, but no, that's good. So maybe shifting gears from the coaching thing a little bit, you referenced the Lomong brothers earlier. Maybe talk about, and forgive me if my verbiage is incorrect, but you and Beth basically became foster parents for the Lomong brothers. Is that right?
We did. It started with watching HBO Real Sports, and Lopez mentioned on his interview about him being a lost boy of Sudan and his journey, that he'd like, they took Lopez Lomong back to Africa to meet his mother that he had been separated from since he was 6 years old. It was like 16 years. A very powerful piece of television. It's on YouTube. Highly recommend it. Any rate, it was, my wife and I were really, really moved by this piece of television. And when he said he wanted his two younger brothers to come to America to get an education, Beth and I were like, we have this house we use one room in. We could do this. We could, maybe Fork Union Military Academy would be able to get them here on student visas, and we could take it from there, and they could go to Fork Union. So Lopez's coach had been a teammate of one of the former Fork Union greats, David Fleener. They were teammates at University of Georgia. So I called Fleener that moment, and I said, we need to try to do this. He got in touch with Hayes that night, and we heard from Lopez in about 2 or 3 days. And so that got the ball rolling. They arrived, that was in the November of 07, and they arrived in February of 09. So it took a long time, a lot of paperwork, a lot of red tape, a lot of minutia. It took Lopez 3 trips to get them back to this country. But Fork Union Military Academy was really a trooper in providing the paperwork and the support to make that happen.
Wow.
And it was they got here, they were 11 and 12 years of age, and there was a huge cultural change for them, a language difference, and so it was quite a process, starting from the ground up.
Yeah, I remember, and for the people listening that aren't aware, Lopez has a book, Running for My Life, and he actually talks about his experience coming over from Sudan, and it's one of the most powerful books that I've ever read.
Yeah, absolutely, and he is one of the most powerful people you will ever meet, in terms of just his energy level and his positive attitude. He really does not. For somebody that went through all of that, he does not carry he doesn't outwardly carry the burden. I'm sure it's there of everything he went through, but he's not let it stop him from living the American dream. And he's a great person. I learned something new from him really every time I'm around him, but he was who he went over and he made it happen. Yeah. And he's one of those guys, he's never defeated. He ran 27:06 this past fall in the World Championships and finished in 7th or 8th place. But he's not going to let that drag him down. He's going to keep charging.
Yeah. like you said, one of the most complete distance runners, of the last 25 years, I would say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Approaching, like I said, the Alan Webb
Yeah.
accomplishment from one end to the other on the distance spectrum. Yeah, Lopez Lomong is right there.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you've learned since your time of Alex and Pete coming over? What has that experience taught you?
I think that what would I say that I have learned from that? As an American, you have no idea how lucky you have it. The things that they went through before they got here, no child should really have to go through, and that's really, it's everything that they've done has been extremely brave and very hard to do.
Yeah.
To leave your family in one country to come to another where you don't know anything, to be at that young of an age. When Alex arrived with Peter, Alex had tuberculosis, which nobody knew, so he had to be treated for it. And that all of those types of things, the health conditions they came with, some of the traumatic experiences they had been through, not good. And and they assimilated into this life and did very well.
Yeah. Peter went on to run at Northern Arizona and was on the team where they won the national championship.
He did, and Peter did a wonderful job in immersing himself into the workload during those years. When he went off, he was a walk-on. We were not, walking onto the Northern Arizona track cross-country team is an uphill climb. And he did a wonderful, right out the gate, he made their top 7. They had redshirted a lot of runners that year. The next year, he was the 8th man as a sophomore. And we sat down and talked, and I said, Peter, I really believe that the big difference between you and some of the other people on the team is they stayed in Flagstaff for the summer, and you came back to Virginia. So the summer before his junior year, he stayed and trained twice and 3 times a day and just immersed himself in that 7,000-foot air. And, he had a great year in his junior year, and it was really accomplishing a lot. And my wife and I and our son Jonah and my in-laws, we made the trip to Louisville, Kentucky that day or that weekend. And I thought that Peter's going to do well. He's going to probably be somewhere between 40th and 60th place. He's going to be on a great team. Maybe they're going to win. But I had no idea that he was going to get 8th place. And I remember shaking and quivering and then locking up. He got to the 5-mile mark, and he was in the top 10. And I thought, wow, this is happening. And I just stood with hardly breathing and stared at the Jumbotron until he finished. He finished 8th, and then it was just this huge celebration. But what a moment. What an absolute moment. So never get tired of watching that. Yeah, it was.
Incredible.
It was worth it. It was 9 years. Every bit, every inch, everything that we ever did together, all of the time, it was worth that moment. So.
And that's why people, I think, get so emotional at those experiences, because a lot of people just see the end result, but they don't know everything that went on in those 9 years preceding,
Right. In the early days when he was at Fork Union, he did not necessarily possess the temperament to do something like what he did that day. He was a 49-second 400-meter runner for us.
Yeah.
And ran in the mid 150s for the 800, which are great marks. But at the time he was at Fork Union, his temperament did not really suit doing something like he did that day.
Wow.
So it was a wonderful moment. Yeah.
That's incredible. And then Alex went on to Ohio State.
He went to Ohio State. He had a very interesting recruiting process because he was not a qualifier until March of that year, of his senior year. His ACT scores came back and his SAT scores, and he had qualified on both ends. So we were very happy about that. He had looked at Penn State, and by that point in the process, Penn State didn't have enough money to offer him. And he had run about 151. And then came the Dogwood Track Classic. And about 2 weeks out, you can talk to anybody involved in our program. Bob Berger and I looked at one another, and I said, and he was like, there's no doubt this is something unreal is going to happen. So, you kind of walk around on eggshells for those 2 weeks thinking, here we go. You watch everything. And then that day comes and wow. And I got it wrong. I thought Andrew Hunter was going to go from the gun, but Brandon McGorty went out so hard, nobody was going to, there was no going from the gun from the other two because Brandon McGorty just went berserk the first lap. And showed a lot of tenacity to hang on. That was, for me, that day was very emotional in that the last conversation that I ever had with my father before he passed away was about Alex. It was at Christmas time, and he was like, do you think Alex is going to break 150? I said, yeah, I think he will, and we talked a great deal about it. My father passed away in February, and so for Alex to go out and run 148.67, I was still dealing with a lot of personal grief on because my father died very unexpectedly. And so for him to run that 148 that day, it was overwhelming. And it opened up a door for Alex. He ended up getting this full scholarship to Ohio State. So it all came together.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. I still get chills thinking about that race and thinking about just some of these. I think back to all the runners that have come through Fork Union in your program in Central Virginia and just some of these memorable races. I was thinking about earlier the Foot Locker South sophomore race when old Region 2 put 5 guys in the top 5. Things like that. Just Virginia. Just Virginia distance running has such a rich history,
Well, and I think one of the things that I enjoy the most is the family atmosphere in Central Virginia. I'm a huge Lindy Bain fan. I'm a Jerry Cutright fan. Adrian Lorenzoni is going to knock everybody off the perch. He's going to take it to a new level, already beginning to.
Yeah.
With what he knows. So it's great to see what goes on in the other programs. Your father is the most underrated coach, and that there's some years I look at them and I go, they're not very good this year. And that might be in December. And then next thing you know, in May, there they are. They're unreal. So he does a tremendous job of just bringing a group along. And that to me, that's a mark of a great coach.
Yeah. Yeah, it's. I think he likes it that way, flying under the radar. If you know my dad, so he'll always tell you they're not that good too. So,
flying under the radar is his deal. That's true. You're exactly right.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's maybe as we kind of wind this thing down, Winston? What's looking forward? What's one thing that you're excited about, just with coaching or just in general?
I guess what I'm excited about is seeing how we're going to what kind of tweaks, what kind of innovations can we do to overcome this recent development. It's just been awful to think everything came to a standstill. It's just not what we are in this country. It's just been I'll be eager to see what things look like. I was flipping around the TV the other day and came across a live tennis match on the Tennis Channel. It was a court on top of a hill in Spain, and there were 6 people there, and it was a professional tennis tournament. I said, wow, this is what we've come to,
Wow.
and sports with no fans. We're hoping to hold the Fork Union Invitational on September the 19th. More than likely, that will be a 2-day event with like tee times, if you will, for teams to run the course, and then we'll integrate the times and declare a winner. We'll mail them the award. So it's going to be very different times. I'm looking forward to getting back to normal and seeing, obviously it's a 30-year mark. I don't have too many more years to go, but looking forward to getting back to the process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, one of the things, if you look at historically in our country, anytime we go through something challenging like we're in right now, there's always on the other side these positive developments that come out of that. There's always, if you look back to the 2008 financial crisis, companies like Venmo, companies like Uber came out of this, and just these innovative ideas. And so, I think that while, yes, we want to get out of this situation sooner than later, I am optimistic that there are going to be some innovations that make us better, that make us approach the way that we do things better. And I certainly believe that'll apply into sports as well.
Yeah, I'm hopeful. It's just ready for it to be over with. But we'll see. And Fork Union has some interesting days ahead, with enrollment and so forth. It's a different kind of time. So we'll see where we go from here.
Absolutely. But, well, Winston, hey, listen, appreciate you jumping on today, man. I really enjoyed the conversation. It's always a pleasure, and always just appreciate your insights.
Daniel, I'm looking forward to hearing you announce a track meet again, and that's what I'm looking forward to. I really am honored to be on this show, and I wish the show the best as it works.
Well, appreciate it. And for everybody listening, certainly feel free to share, to rate us. We're on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube. If this was valuable for you, make sure it's valuable for somebody else too. So
will do.
Awesome, Winston. Well, thank you again, man. We appreciate it.
Take care, my friend. We'll see you real soon.
Yes, sir.